Smoke covered the sky like a black blanket. The ground shook from distant explosions, and the smell of burned metal filled the air. Zaralyn lay half buried under broken stone and twisted steel. Her armor was cracked, her weapon lay a few meters away, and her right leg would not move. She tried to push herself up, but pain exploded through her body, making her vision blur. She had been a warrior all her life, but now she could not even lift herself from the ground. Around her, soldiers ran past, human and alien alike. Some glanced at her, recognized her face, and kept going. No one wanted to carry a half-dead fighter. Everyone was trying to survive. She could hear their boots hitting the ground, fading away into the chaos. Zaralyn's ears rang from a nearby blast. Her head fell back against the rubble, her breath coming in short gasps. Through the ringing, she heard footsteps, slow, steady, and getting closer. Her hand twitched toward her blade. She expected an enemy finishing strike. But instead, a human voice broke through the noise. "Don't move," he said. "I've got you." She blinked and saw a human soldier crouched beside her. His armor was scratched, the number on his chest plate partly burned away. His helmet visor was up, revealing sweat on his dirt-covered face. His eyes were sharp, scanning the area while his hands quickly checked her injuries. "Leave," she said, her voice rough. "You'll die here." He ignored her words. "You can't walk," he said. "I can carry you." More explosions rumbled nearby, and the human, Ethan Cole, looked over his shoulder. Enemy shapes were moving in the smoke. He knew staying here meant death, but leaving her behind was something he couldn't do. Grabbing the edges of the debris, he pushed it off her with a grunt. The metal burned his gloves, but he didn't stop until she was free. He slid one arm under her shoulders, the other under her knees, and lifted. "You are a fool," Zaralyn said, though her voice was weaker now. "Yeah," he replied, breathing hard. "But I'm your fool today." Gunfire cracked through the smoke. Ethan crouched low, carrying her weight like a shield on his back, and moved toward the cover of a half-destroyed wall. Bullets chipped the stone beside him. Zaralyn tilted her head enough to see the others still running, leaving them both behind. Her people believed humans were fragile, unfit for the front lines. Yet here was one, risking everything for her, when her own kind had turned away. They moved along the side of the wall, rubble crunching under Ethan's boots. He kept glancing over his shoulder, checking the enemy's distance. A shadow appeared ahead. Enemy soldier. Ethan pressed his back against the wall, setting Zaralyn down gently against the rubble. "Stay here," he whispered. He stepped forward, knife in hand. The enemy didn't even hear him coming before Ethan drove the blade into his side, muffling the sound as the soldier dropped. Ethan caught the falling body before it hit the ground and dragged it out of sight. He returned to Zaralyn, breathing heavily. "All right, let's keep moving." She wanted to tell him to save himself, but his eyes left no room for argument. He lifted her again, adjusting his grip. Her head rested against his shoulder now, and she could feel the pounding of his heart. Another blast shook the ground, and a burning building collapsed ahead, blocking their path. Ethan swore under his breath. He turned, searching for another way. The only option was an alley filled with thick smoke. Without hesitation, he ran into it. The smoke burned his lungs, and he had to slow his breathing to keep from coughing. He could barely see, but his memory of the city layout guided him. He had been repairing this sector before the war reached it. In the haze, shadows moved again. 2 enemy soldiers, their rifles ready. Ethan ducked behind a broken doorframe, lowering Zaralyn carefully. He drew his sidearm, his hand steady despite the chaos. 2 quick shots. 2 bodies dropped. He holstered the weapon, picked her up again, and kept going. The heat from nearby fires was intense, but he didn't stop until they reached a narrow passage leading away from the main battle. "Why?" Zaralyn asked suddenly, her voice hoarse. "Why risk your life for me?" Ethan shifted her weight, eyes fixed ahead. "Because someone has to." She stared at him, confused. In her world, soldiers fought for orders, for victory, for survival, but rarely for each other without reason. This human's answer made no sense, yet it felt heavier than any battle oath. Another burst of gunfire cracked behind them, and Ethan quickened his pace. Somewhere ahead, the sound of collapsing buildings echoed through the ruined streets. They were not safe yet. He ducked into the ruins of a shop, setting her down behind a counter. He knelt, checking her wounds again. Blood seeped through the cracks in her armor, and his jaw tightened. "You're bleeding too." she said, noticing a dark stain spreading under his arm. Later, he replied. You first. They sat in silence for a moment, only the sound of distant battle filling the air. Then Ethan reached for his comms device, calling for extraction, but the static told him the signal was dead. They were on their own. Zaralen looked at him, this stubborn human who had stopped when no one else did, and for the first time in her warrior life, she didn't know if she wanted to fight him or fight beside him. The sound of boots on stone snapped both their heads toward the doorway. Enemy voices grew louder. Ethan raised his rifle, the barrel aimed at the shadows moving closer. Stay behind me, he said. And as the first enemy soldier stepped into view, Zaralen understood. This human was not going to walk away. Not now. Not ever. Ethan fired first, the sharp crack of his rifle echoing in the ruined shop. The enemy soldier fell before he could react, but another rushed in behind him, shouting in a language Ethan didn't understand. Ethan pulled the trigger again. Click. Empty. He dropped the rifle without hesitation, grabbing the enemy's arm as the soldier lunged forward. The two crashed into the broken counter, splinters flying. Ethan twisted hard, that forcing the soldier's weapon to the side before it could fire. With a grunt, he slammed the enemy's head into the counter's edge. The soldier went limp. Zaralen watched in silence, her eyes narrowing. She had seen humans fight before, but this one fought like every move mattered. Not for glory, but for survival. He didn't waste energy. He didn't hesitate. Ethan picked up the enemy's weapon, checked the magazine, and slung it over his shoulder. We need to move, he said, glancing toward the street. Outside, the city burned. Buildings leaned against each other like wounded giants, smoke pouring from their broken walls. Every corner was a trap, either snipers, patrols, or collapsing structures. Ethan knew the main roads were suicide, so he took Zaralen through narrow back alleys, stepping over fallen beams and broken glass. She felt every movement as he carried her, the jolts of his stride shaking her injured leg. Put me down, she said. You can move faster without me. Not happening, he answered without looking at her. They ducked under a collapsed roof, the space so tight Ethan had to crouch low while still holding her. His muscles burned from the weight, but he kept going. Sweat dripped down his face, mixing with the grime already smeared across his skin. In the distance, heavy footsteps echoed, too slow and heavy to be human. Zaralen recognized the sound instantly. Enemy exosuits, she whispered. If they see us, we're dead. Ethan pressed himself against a wall, shifting her weight so he could draw the stolen rifle. Through the cracks of the broken wall, he saw the metallic shapes of the enemy suits moving in formation. Their armor gleamed through the smoke, weapons ready. He waited, barely breathing, until they passed. Then he moved again, faster this time. Every second they stayed in this sector increased the risk of being spotted. They turned into a side street, only to find their path blocked by a massive pile of debris. Ethan cursed under his breath. Going back was not an option. The exosuits were still close. The only way forward was a collapsed service tunnel under the debris. Zaralen's eyes narrowed. That tunnel is dangerous. Bio creatures live down there. Even armed patrols avoid it. Better than getting shot, Ethan replied. He knelt and set her down against the rubble. Using his bare hands and a piece of metal pipe, he shifted broken stones until the opening was wide enough for him to crawl through with her. The moment they entered, the air changed. It was damp, cold, and thick with the stench of rotting flesh. The only light came from a small glow stick Ethan cracked and tied to his vest. The green light reflected in Zaralen's eyes as she scanned the darkness. Something moved ahead, a shadow that didn't belong to the rocks. Then came the sound, soft and wet, like something crawling across the ground. Ethan stopped, raising his weapon. We're not alone, he whispered. Two shapes slid into view, their bodies long and covered in chitin, eyes glowing faintly. They moved low, their legs clicking against the tunnel walls. Zaralen's voice was calm despite the tension. They hunt the injured first. You're carrying blood. Ethan didn't answer. The first creature lunged and he fired, the shot echoing painfully in the confined space. The blast tore into its head, but the second came from the side, knocking him off balance. He twisted his body, keeping Zaralen from hitting the ground as he slammed the creature into the wall. It hissed, snapping at his face. He drove his knife into its neck again and again until it stopped moving. Breathing hard, he pushed the body aside and lifted her once more. We keep moving, he said, his voice firm but low. The tunnel stretched on, the smell growing worse. The walls dripped with moisture, and sometimes the ground squelched under his boots. Zaralin's head rested against his shoulder now, her voice quieter. Why risk this for me? You don't even know me. I don't have to know you, Ethan said. You're alive. That's enough. She didn't answer, but in her mind, something shifted. No one from her unit had said those words to her before, not even her own commander. After what felt like hours, the tunnel began to slope upward. Faint daylight spilled through cracks ahead. Ethan pushed forward, ignoring the pain in his arms and back. They reached the end, a jagged opening in the wall of a destroyed warehouse. But as Ethan stepped out into the open, voices stopped him. Armed figures moved between the ruins outside, their armor marked with enemy insignia. He set Zaralin down in the shadows. Stay here. Don't make a sound. She watched as he crawled forward, staying low. He counted 4 soldiers, too many for a loud fight. One by one, he moved behind them, striking fast and silent. The first fell with a knife to the throat, the second with a crushed windpipe. The third turned too soon, but Ethan's arm was faster, snapping his neck before a shout could escape. The last soldier noticed too late. Ethan tackled him, drove his knife in, and rolled the body away from the light. When he returned, Zaralen's expression was unreadable. You fight like someone with nothing to lose, she said quietly. Ethan only gave a tired half smile. Right now, I've got one thing to lose. You. He picked her up again and stepped out into the ruins, the path ahead uncertain but open for now. In the distance, the sound of gunfire reminded them the battle wasn't over, and neither was their fight to survive. The air outside the warehouse was sharp with the smell of burning fuel. Thick smoke drifted across the ruined streets, making it hard to see more than a few meters ahead. Ethan moved quickly but carefully, keeping Zaralen close to his chest. His breathing was heavy now, and every step sent a dull ache through his side, where the earlier wound had opened again. Zaralen could feel his heartbeat through his armor. She knew he was hurt, but he didn't slow down. She studied his face as he scanned every shadow and corner. His eyes were alert, calculating, yet there was a stubborn warmth there, a refusal to give up, even when logic said he should. A loud metallic screech echoed nearby, followed by the deep thud of something heavy landing on the street. Ethan ducked into a narrow alley just as a patrol of enemy walkers passed at the far end. Their searchlights swept across the ruins, cutting through the smoke. They're hunting survivors, Zaralen murmured. Then we don't get found, Ethan replied. He followed the alley until it opened into a courtyard filled with fallen masonry. The only way forward was through a half-collapsed archway leading into what looked like another tunnel. This one was different. Reinforced walls, old maintenance lights still flickering. Zaralen frowned. This leads to the old power station. It's unstable. Ethan gave a short nod. Better unstable than surrounded. He stepped inside. The floor was cracked, with wires hanging like vines from the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere ahead, each drop echoing in the dark. Ethan's boots splashed through shallow puddles as he carried her deeper. They had gone only a few meters when a low growl rolled through the tunnel. It wasn't mechanical. It was alive. Ethan froze, his grip tightening on his rifle. Zaralen's eyes shifted toward the sound, her warrior instincts waking despite her injuries. From the shadows ahead, 2 glowing eyes appeared, then a second pair and a third. The creatures stepped into the dim light, their long bodies swaying, claws scraping the metal floor. Their skin was pale and stretched tight, their mouths full of jagged teeth. They're tunnel predators, Zaralen said quietly. They hunt in packs. Ethan set her gently against the wall, placing himself between her and the creatures. Stay behind me. The first one lunged. Ethan fired, the shot echoing painfully in the enclosed space. The creature's head snapped back, but 2 more rushed in from the side. Ethan spun, smashing the butt of his rifle into one and kicking the other back. He shot again, the muzzle flash lighting the tunnel in quick bursts. One of the predators leaped over the fallen body, jaws snapping. Ethan grabbed its throat midair, slamming it down hard, then drove his knife between its ribs. Its screech faded as its body went limp. The last one hesitated, its eyes darting between Ethan and the wounded alien behind him. Then it turned and fled into the darkness. Ethan quickly checked the chamber, half a magazine left. He wiped the blade on his armor and turned back to Zaralyn. You okay? She gave a slow nod, though her gaze lingered on him. You fight like you've done this before. Not with these things, he said, helping her up again. Come on. They continued through the tunnel until the flickering lights ended, leaving only darkness. Ethan pulled out another glow stick, snapping it to life. The pale green light cast long, eerie shadows along the walls. Every sound seemed louder now, the drip of water, the distant rumble of the battle above, the faint rasp of Ethan's breathing. The tunnel began to slope upward. Ahead, a faint orange glow filtered in through a jagged opening. Ethan slowed, crouching as he approached. Through the hole, he could see the remains of the power station's main floor. Fires burned in pools of spilled fuel, casting the room in a shifting light. 2 enemy soldiers patrolled near the far wall, their rifles slung casually but ready. Between them and Ethan's position was a wide-open floor, littered with debris and bodies. There was no way to sneak across carrying Zaralyn. Ethan set her down in the shadows. Wait here. Before she could protest, he crawled out through the hole and dropped silently onto the floor. Moving low, he stayed behind chunks of fallen machinery, waiting for the patrol to separate. When one soldier turned his back, Ethan moved quickly, wrapping an arm around the soldier's neck and dragging him into the shadows. The sound of the body hitting the floor was muffled by the distant roar of fire. The second soldier, noticing the absence of his partner, stepped forward cautiously. Ethan appeared from behind a fuel barrel, his knife flashing once before the man could even raise his weapon. He returned to Zaralyn and lifted her once more. Clear, he said. Crossing the floor, he kept to the edges of the firelight, stepping over steel beams and shattered glass. The heat from the burning fuel made the air shimmer. Zaralyn could feel his arms trembling slightly now, but he didn't slow. At the far end of the station, a doorway opened into the outside world again. Cold wind rushed in, carrying the smell of wet earth. But as Ethan stepped through, the sound of voices froze him in place. He set Zaralyn down behind a half-broken wall and peered around the corner. 4 more enemy soldiers stood in the street ahead, blocking the only exit. They weren't patrolling. They were waiting. They know we're coming, Zaralyn whispered. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we'll surprise them first. He adjusted his grip on the rifle, took a deep breath, and stepped out from cover. The first soldier didn't even see him before the shot dropped him. The others reacted instantly, returning fire. Ethan dove behind a burned-out vehicle, bullets pinging off the metal. Zaralyn, still on the ground, spotted an enemy moving to flank him. Without thinking, she grabbed a discarded pistol and fired, hitting the soldier in the chest. The recoil jarred her injured arm. Yeah, but she didn't stop until he was down. Ethan used the opening to move forward, taking out the last 2 with precise bursts. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of nearby fires. He returned to her side, his face serious, but his voice steady. You're a good shot. She smirked faintly despite the pain. And you're impossible to kill. Ethan lifted her again, stepping over the fallen soldiers. The street ahead was empty for now, but the war was still raging in the distance. They would have to keep moving, because stopping meant death. The street stretched ahead, littered with rubble and broken vehicles. Smoke drifted low over the cracked pavement, curling around Ethan's boots as he carried Zaralyn forward. His arms ached, and the wound under his ribs burned with every step, but he kept moving. The sounds of battle were close now, short bursts of gunfire, distant explosions, and the heavy thud of artillery. Zaralyn's head shifted against his shoulder. You can't fight carrying me forever, she said, her voice firm despite her weakness. Don't plan to fight forever, Ethan replied, just long enough to get you out. They turned a corner and froze. Ahead, in the middle of the road, a squad of enemy scouts stood beside an armored transport. They were scanning the area, their rifles ready. Ethan ducked back behind a half-collapsed wall, setting Zaralyn down gently. They're blocking the way, he whispered. We'll have to go through them. Zaralyn's eyes narrowed. Then leave me here. You can move faster alone. Not an option, Ethan said, pulling a knife from his belt. She studied him, her pride clashing with the strange trust she felt toward him. If you try, you could die. He smirked faintly. Then I'll just have to not die. He slipped away into the shadows, circling around the rubble toward the enemy. The first scout never saw him coming. Ethan's knife slid silently under the man's helmet, and he lowered the body to the ground without a sound. The second turned at the wrong moment, spotting a flicker of movement. His mouth opened to shout, but Ethan lunged, clamping a hand over his mouth and dragging him into the cover of a broken doorway. A quick, sharp twist of the blade ended the struggle. Zaralen watched from her hidden spot, her sharp eyes tracking his movements. She had fought beside many warriors, but this human moved with a mix of discipline and desperation she had never seen. Every motion was calculated, but his determination burned in every step. 2 scouts remained, standing near the transport. Ethan crouched low, reaching for a loose brick on the ground. He tossed it down an alley, and the sharp clatter made one scout turn his head. That was all the opening he needed. Ethan sprinted forward, silent and fast. The first fell with a single strike to the throat. The second swung his rifle up, but Ethan shoved the barrel aside and slammed the knife into the gap in his armor. The soldier dropped, gasping, before falling still. Ethan dragged the bodies out of sight and motioned for Zaralen. He lifted her again, carrying her past the transport and deeper into the ruined streets. They were only a few blocks away from what Ethan remembered as the extraction zone, but he knew the fighting there would be the worst. His comm was still dead, no way to confirm if anyone was waiting. As they passed a shattered apartment block, the ground shook violently. Dust rained down, and Ethan stumbled, barely catching himself before falling. A sharp boom followed, and a plume of smoke rose from somewhere ahead. "That's the artillery," Zaralen said grimly. "They're clearing everything." Ethan didn't slow. "Then we move faster." They crossed an open plaza, the broken fountain in the center spraying only muddy water. It was too exposed. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to keep his guard up. Sure enough, movement flashed in the corner of his eye. 3 enemy soldiers emerged from behind the fountain, rifles raised. Ethan dove behind a toppled statue, keeping Zaralen shielded with his body. Bullets chipped away at the stone, each impact shaking through him. "I can draw their fire," she said suddenly. "Not happening," Ethan snapped. He pulled a smoke grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, and tossed it toward the fountain. Thick gray clouds burst into the plaza, swallowing the soldiers from sight. Ethan moved fast, circling wide through the smoke. He closed the distance before they could react, taking the first down with a shot to the chest, the second with a knife to the side. The third soldier stumbled back, firing wildly into the smoke. Ethan grabbed the barrel of his rifle, wrenching it away before smashing the butt into his helmet. The man fell hard, not moving again. When the smoke cleared, Ethan returned to Zaralen and lifted her once more. She studied him silently for a long moment before speaking. "You risk yourself too easily." He adjusted his grip. "Better me than you." They reached the far side of the plaza, where the road narrowed between 2 rows of half-destroyed buildings. Ethan slowed, scanning the windows for movement. His caution was justified. A sniper's shot cracked against the wall just above his head. He ducked into a doorway, setting Zaralen down in cover. "Sniper, 2nd floor, northeast building," she said immediately, her warrior training still sharp. Ethan nodded. "I'll handle it." He slipped through the building they were in, climbing a half-collapsed stairwell to the 2nd floor. Moving low, he reached the window opposite the sniper's perch. He waited, watching the glint of the rifle's scope. When the sniper adjusted his aim, Ethan leaned out, fired a single precise shot, and the figure slumped over the window ledge. Returning to Zaralen, he helped her to her feet just enough to carry her again. They moved down the road, the sound of gunfire growing louder with every step. As they approached the final corner before the extraction zone, Ethan stopped. He could see through the gaps in the wall. A dozen enemy troops, entrenched behind barricades, controlling the street. Zaralen's voice was low. "You can't fight that many with me in your arms." Ethan set her down gently, checking his weapons. "I don't have to fight them all, just enough to get you through." She reached out, her hand gripping his wrist. "If you fall, I will not leave you." He looked at her for a long moment, then gave a short nod. "Then we do this together." They both knew the next few minutes would decide whether they lived or died. Ethan tightened his grip on his rifle, and Zaralen, despite her injuries, steadied the pistol she had taken earlier. Outside, the enemy waited, unaware that 2 determined fighters, one human, one alien, were about to challenge them head-on. The barricade ahead was a wall of sandbags, metal sheets, and broken vehicles stacked high. Enemy soldiers crouched behind it, scanning the street for movement. The glow of their scopes caught the light through the drifting smoke. Ethan crouched low behind a cracked wall, Zaralen resting beside him. He studied the layout. 2 machine gunners on either side, riflemen in the middle, and a heavy trooper in the back with a rocket launcher. Taking them head-on was suicide, but there was no other way to the extraction zone. Ethan adjusted the strap of his rifle. "I'll make noise on the left. When they look my way, you take out whoever you can." Zaralen's grip tightened on the pistol. "I can't move fast, but I can still aim." "That's all I need." He slipped away through the rubble, circling to the far left flank. Bits of stone and glass crunched under his boots. Every sound felt too loud. He reached the corner of a collapsed shop, peeked out, and then fired a short burst into the barricade. The enemy reacted instantly. Shouts rang out, and rifles swung toward his position. As planned, Zaralen's pistol cracked from the shadows, hitting a rifleman in the chest. Another soldier jerked back, clutching his side. Ethan moved, sprinting toward a burnt-out transport for cover. Bullets ripped through the air, hitting metal with sharp clangs. He leaned out, firing at the nearest machine gunner until the man slumped over his weapon. The heavy trooper in the back raised his launcher, aiming for Ethan's position. Ethan ducked as a rocket whooshed past, exploding against a building and showering the street with debris. Dust filled the air, making it harder for the enemy to see. Using the cover, Ethan dashed forward. He reached the barricade's side, throwing a grenade over the top. The blast shook the ground, knocking several soldiers off their feet. Before they could recover, he climbed over, landing in the middle of the chaos. One soldier swung his rifle at him, but Ethan jammed his elbow into the man's throat, grabbed his weapon, and fired point blank into another enemy. The heavy trooper turned to face him, but Zaralen's pistol cracked again from behind cover, hitting the joint of his armor. Ethan finished him with 2 shots to the visor. The street fell silent, except for the distant rumble of artillery. Ethan climbed back over the barricade, running to Zaralen. She was pale, breathing heavily, but her eyes were sharp. "You cleared them?" she asked. "All of them," he said, lifting her once more. They moved quickly now. The extraction zone was close. Ethan could see the faint outline of the landing pad through the smoke. But between them and safety lay the last bridge, a stretch of broken concrete hanging over a deep canal. The bridge was half destroyed, with jagged edges and holes in the middle. On the far side, enemy snipers had set up positions, their rifles already searching for targets. Ethan ducked behind a piece of rubble before stepping onto the bridge. "Smoke grenades will give us a chance," he said. He pulled 2 from his belt, yanked the pins, and tossed them onto the bridge. Thick plumes rolled out, hiding them from the sniper's view. He carried Zaralen forward quickly, boots clanging on the cracked surface. Halfway across, a gust of wind thinned the smoke, exposing them. A rifle cracked, and a bullet tore into the ground inches from Ethan's foot. Another shot grazed the edge of his armor, the impact jarring his arm. "Give me the rifle," Zaralen said suddenly. He hesitated, but her eyes burned with determination. He shifted her weight, handing her the weapon while still holding her steady. She aimed quickly, her shot cutting through the air and dropping one of the snipers. She fired again, forcing the second to take cover. Ethan pushed forward, his boots pounding against the bridge until they reached the far side. They tumbled into cover behind a pile of sandbags, both breathing hard. "We're close," he said, "just a few 100 meters." But the sound of engines rumbled through the street. An enemy armored vehicle turned the corner, its turret already swinging toward them. Ethan set Zaralen down behind cover. "Stay low," he told her. He sprinted toward a wrecked truck, sliding behind it as the vehicle's heavy gun tore chunks from the pavement. He spotted a crate of explosives in the truck bed, probably left behind by retreating troops. Grabbing one, he pulled the pin and waited for the turret to swing away. Then, he ran into the open, weaving between bursts of gunfire, and hurled the explosive under the vehicle. The blast ripped through the street, flipping the armored transport onto its side in a cloud of fire and smoke. Ethan staggered back to Zaralen, coughing from the dust. "You're insane," she said, but there was a faint smile in her voice. "Maybe," he admitted, "but it worked." They moved again, weaving through the last stretch of ruins. The landing pad came into view, scarred by battle but still intact. A single dropship sat on it, its engines idling. As they approached, a voice shouted from the ramp, "Hurry! We're leaving in 2 minutes!" Ethan's pace quickened, but before they could reach the pad, another squad of enemy soldiers emerged from a side alley, cutting them off. The dropship's engines roared louder, the countdown to escape ticking away in Ethan's mind. He set Zarlin down gently, handing her a fresh magazine for the pistol. "Hold them off," he said. She raised the weapon, her aim steady despite her injuries. Ethan stepped forward into the open, drawing fire as he picked off the nearest enemies. Zarlin's shots rang out beside him, dropping another. One by one, the soldiers fell until the last stumbled back into the alley, fleeing. Ethan didn't wait to see if more were coming. He scooped Zarlin up and ran for the ramp. They reached the dropship as the engines roared to full power. The ramp began to rise, closing them inside. Ethan set her down on a bench, collapsing beside her. Through the open hatch, they both saw the city burning below, the bridge behind them already swarmed with enemy troops too late to stop them. Zarlin turned her head toward him. "You didn't walk away," she said softly. "Not my style," he replied, leaning back as the dropship carried them away from the fight. The dropship rattled as it climbed higher into the smoky sky. The pilot shouted over the roar of the engines, "We're not clear yet! Enemy air units incoming!" Ethan's body tensed. He glanced at Zarlin, who was strapped to the bench, her armor still cracked and blood staining the edges. Her breathing was slow, controlled, but her eyes stayed locked on him. She could read it in his face. He was already planning his next move. Through the small viewport, dark shapes appeared against the clouds, sleek enemy fighters diving toward them. The dropship's guns opened fire, rattling the hull. One fighter exploded in a burst of flame, but 2 more broke through, their cannons hammering the dropship's side. The pilot cursed. "Shields won't hold! Someone's got to man the side turret!" Ethan didn't hesitate. He unbuckled and sprinted to the hatch, bracing himself as the wind howled in. The cold air hit like a punch, and the smell of burning fuel filled his nose. He grabbed the turret controls, swinging the gun toward the nearest fighter. The enemy dove straight at them, weapons lighting up. Ethan squeezed the trigger, the turret's cannons spitting fire. Tracers tore through the fighter's wing, sending it spinning into the clouds. The second fighter broke away, circling for another pass. Ethan tracked it, waiting until it committed to the attack before firing again. The rounds punched through its cockpit, and it exploded in a spray of debris. The sky cleared for a moment, but the pilot shouted again, "We've got more incoming, and I'm low on fuel. We can't make it to base. Closest safe zone is a forward outpost, but it's hot." "Hot?" Ethan asked. "Enemy forces nearby," the pilot replied grimly. Ethan looked back at Zarlin. She was pale, and her hands rested on the straps of her seat. "Do it," she said. "We can hold it until help comes." Minutes later, the dropship descended toward the outpost. From above, Ethan could see flashes of gunfire around the perimeter. Smoke rose from damaged walls, and small groups of defenders fought to keep the enemy from overrunning the gates. The dropship landed hard, the ramp slamming down. "Go!" the pilot yelled. Ethan lifted Zarlin and carried her out into the chaos. The air was thick with dust and the sharp scent of plasma fire. Soldiers shouted orders, rifles cracking in every direction. A medic ran over, motioning for Ethan to bring Zarlin inside. But before he could, a shell exploded nearby, knocking them both off their feet. Ethan shielded her with his body, feeling the heat of the blast wash over him. When the dust settled, enemy troops were charging through a breach in the wall. Ethan scrambled up, helping Zarlin behind a stack of supply crates. He grabbed a fallen rifle and turned to face the breach. The first wave of enemies poured in, firing wildly. Ethan's shots were precise, each one dropping a target before they could get too close. Zarlin, despite her injuries, leaned over the crate and fired her pistol, hitting a soldier in the leg and slowing the rush. A defender shouted from the wall, "They've got armor coming." Ethan's eyes narrowed. If a vehicle got through that breach, the outpost wouldn't last 5 minutes. He scanned the ground until he spotted a crate marked with the universal symbol for explosives. "Cover me," he told Zarlin. He sprinted across the open yard, bullets snapping past his head. Grabbing a charge from the crate, he armed it and ran toward the breach. Enemy fire rained down on him, but he dove into cover just in time. When the armored vehicle rolled through, its heavy guns sweeping the yard, Ethan popped up, sprinted to the side, and slapped the explosive against its treads. He barely made it back behind the crates before the charge detonated. The explosion ripped the vehicle apart, showering the area with debris. The defenders cheered, but the fight was far from over. The enemy regrouped outside, preparing for another push. Ethan knelt beside Zaralyn. "We can't stay here. When they break through again, we'll be trapped." She met his gaze, her voice low. "There's a comms tower in the east section. If we can reach it, I can send a signal to my people. They'll send reinforcements." He nodded. "Then that's where we're going." They waited for a lull in the fighting, then slipped away along the outer wall. The path to the east section was narrow, choked with rubble and fallen beams. Twice they had to stop as patrols passed by, Ethan holding her close to keep her hidden in the shadows. When they reached the comms tower, it was worse than they'd hoped. The door was sealed, and 2 enemy guards stood outside. Ethan set her down gently and crept forward, using the smoke and debris for cover. He came up behind the first guard, pulling him into a chokehold until he went limp. The second turned, but Ethan's knife flashed once, and the fight was over. He opened the door, helping Zaralyn inside. The equipment was old, dust coating the panels, but the system still hummed faintly. Zaralyn slid into the chair, fingers moving across the controls. She spoke quickly into the transmitter, sending coordinates and a distress call in her own language. "It's done," she said after a tense minute. "They're coming." Before Ethan could answer, the sound of boots echoed outside. More enemies were closing in. He moved to the doorway, raising his rifle. "They'll have to go through me first," he said. Zaralyn, despite her pain, came to his side with the pistol. "Through us," she corrected. The first enemy soldier appeared in the doorway, and Ethan's shot dropped him instantly. More followed, their fire filling the small space with the smell of scorched metal. Ethan and Zaralyn fought side by side, every shot and movement in perfect rhythm. Outside, the roar of engines grew louder, a different sound, deeper and stronger. Zaralyn's eyes lit up. "That's my people." Moments later, alien gunships swept over the outpost, their cannons tearing into the enemy lines. The surviving attackers broke and fled, disappearing into the smoke. Ethan lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Zaralyn leaned against the wall, exhaustion finally catching up to her. "You stayed?" she said softly, "even when you could have run." "Yeah," he replied, giving her a small smile. "Told you I'm not walking away." Outside, the reinforcements landed, and the battered outpost was finally safe. For now. The smoke from the battlefield still clung to the air, turning the sunset into a deep orange haze. The outpost was quiet now, except for the hum of alien gunships parked nearby and the muffled voices of soldiers tending to the wounded. Ethan sat on the steps outside the comms tower, his rifle resting across his knees. His armor was dented, scorched, and streaked with dried blood, most of it his own. Zaralyn approached slowly, leaning on a crutch the medics had given her. Her armor had been removed, replaced with a simple combat tunic. Even with her injuries, her presence carried the same sharp authority she had before the battle. She stopped in front of him, studying him with eyes that had seen too many wars. "You should be in the medical tent," she said. "I've been there," he replied, glancing at the bandage under his side armor. "Didn't feel like staying." She tilted her head. "Humans, always moving, even when standing still." Where he gave a faint smirk. "If I stop, I might not start again." For a moment, neither spoke. The distant sound of engineers repairing the outer wall filled the silence. Finally, Zaralyn stepped closer and lowered herself onto the step beside him. "When you found me," she began, "I thought you were foolish. A soldier throwing away his life for someone already lost." "You weren't lost," Ethan said. "You were just stuck." She shook her head, a faint smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "No. I was finished. My own soldiers had turned away. My commander left me. Even my enemies thought I was not worth the effort to kill. But you," she paused, searching for the right words. "You carried me when I could not move. You fought for me when I could not fight. That is not something I can ignore." Ethan leaned back against the wall, letting her words sink in. "You don't owe me anything." "That is where you are wrong," she said firmly. "On my world, there is a bond older than our wars, a warrior's oath. When one life is carried through fire by another, that life belongs to the one who saved it until the debt is repaid in full. He turned to look at her. You're saying you're in my debt? I am saying, she replied, her voice steady, that I will fight by your side until my last breath. Wherever you go, I will follow. Whatever battle you face, I will stand with you. Ethan tried to laugh it off, but the seriousness in her gaze made it impossible. That's a lot to promise. It is not a promise, she said. It is law. Before he could answer, a young alien soldier approached, saluting sharply. Commander Zaralin, your transport is ready. The council wants you back at the capital for recovery. Zaralin nodded without looking away from Ethan. Tell them I will come, but not alone. The soldier hesitated. The human is not. That is an order, she cut in. Her voice was calm, but there was no doubt she meant it. The soldier glanced between them, then saluted again and left. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you just signed me up for something I didn't agree to. You agreed when you picked me up from the rubble, she said simply. They sat there for a while longer, watching the alien gunships lift off one by one. The outpost began to empty as reinforcements secured the area. The fires were out, the walls repaired enough to hold, and the dead were being carried away under dark cloth. When the time came, Zaralin stood and extended her hand to him. Come, we have a journey to make. He took her hand, letting her pull him up. His body protested every movement, but he ignored it. They walked toward the transport together, passing soldiers who paused to stare. Whispers followed them, rumors about the human who had carried the unmoving warrior through the heart of the battle, who had fought when others had fled. Some looked at him with respect, others with disbelief. Inside the transport, the seats were arranged facing each other. Zaralin sat across from him, her posture straight despite her injuries. She studied him for a long moment before speaking again. My people will not understand at first, she said. They will see you as weak because you are human. But I will tell them what I saw. I will tell them about the man who would not walk away. Ethan looked out the window at the fading battlefield. Not sure they'll care about my story. They will, she said with quiet certainty, because it will not be just your story. It will be ours. The transport lifted off, the roar of the engines vibrating through the floor. Below them, the outpost shrank into the distance until it was just another scar on the land. Zaralin leaned back, closing her eyes for the first time since the battle. Rest, Ethan Cole. The next fight will come soon enough. He smiled faintly, leaning his head against the wall. Just make sure you don't get stuck again. Her eyes opened, a spark of amusement in them. If I do, I expect you to carry me. Always, he said. And as the transport sped toward the unknown, both warrior and human knew that whatever battles waited ahead, they would face them together, not as strangers from different worlds, but as fighters bound by fire, blood, and an oath that neither would ever break.